Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to the Wolff Den presented by Win Again Academy. I'm Matt Wolff, founder and CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Win Again Academy has a great networking event tomorrow night, so check it out. Today's guest is Erik Therwanger. Welcome to the Wolff Den. How's everything?
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you having me on today.
Hope you had a good holiday weekend. It was a lot of good going on. Obviously, a lot of sadness as well, some incidents, but overall, pretty good weekend. Hope you had one as well. For those in the audience who don't know who you are, give us a quick introduction and let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my name's Erik Therwanger. I'm the founder of Think Great. We are a business coaching company. I'm also a keynote speaker, so I go out and I deliver messages based on 7 books that I've written, and I also founded the Think Great Foundation. We award scholarships to military spouses as a way of thanking them for all the sacrifices they make.
Well, that's certainly a worthy cause. Definitely want to get into more of that. 7 books. That's a lot of books. How did you become an author?
Well, I was the vice president of a media company in Southern California for over 7 years. And prior to that, I was in the Marine Corp. I've also been my wife's caregiver through 4 battles of different cancer. And after she survived cardiac arrest, she actually passed away while I was doing CPR on her. And then they brought her back after she was gone for 15 minutes, and she made pretty much a full recovery. And so about 10 years ago, I started to combine a lot of my life experiences in the Corps, as a caregiver, as an executive business leader. People just start asking you questions. How did you achieve success in this area? How could you help me with this? And I came up with the idea to teach people to think great, which really started out as my first book. And it was just called Think Great. And I think it was too big. There was too much in there. It was like the director's cut. And people started to say, I want to hear more about sales. I want to hear more about leadership. And at that point, the feedback was very positive, but I realized I probably have a series on my hand. And so we started breaking those books out. But the book writing process has been about a 10-year journey of just capturing some thoughts on how to help people to achieve greater results in their life and their business.
The Marines, how did you choose to do that? Was that right when you were young, or?
I always knew I wanted to serve. And around 17 and a half, I had a friend who was going in the Army, and she said, I know you want to serve. You should come talk to my recruiter. And so I went to a recruiting station in Pomona, California, and it happened to be kind of a super station where all the branches were there. And I walked in and I met her recruiter. He was an awesome guy. And he gave me a lot of literature with all the Army tanks on it. And it was the GI Bill, the VA loan, benefits. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I can drive a tank. And then while she was talking to him, I actually went across the hall and met with the Navy guy. And he had the same type of literature, GI Bill, VA loan, health benefits, except he had ships. And I'm like, well, that'd be kind of cool to be out on the ocean. So I figured I'd go see the Air Force guy. He had the same literature, except there was airplanes on it. I'm like, well, that'd be cool to fly a plane. And so I had all this stuff. And then at the end of the hallway, there was the Marine recruiter. And I walked down there and he didn't come out to greet me. In fact, he didn't look up from his desk like the other guys did. And so, 17 and a half, you don't really have that much confidence. But I looked in the room and he looked up at me and then went back to work. And I was like, okay, this is different. And I just stood there for a second. He looked back up and he said, can I help you? And I said, yes, I would like to learn about the Marine Corps. And he goes, come in here. So I was already good at following orders, evidently. So I stepped in and he looked at everything that I had. He stood up and he looked at all the literature that I had. And he said something that really hit me in the heart. He said, we have all that stuff too. We have all those benefits. And he said, but becoming a Marine is not about what you get. It's about who you become. And I don't know what exactly I wanted to become at that point, but I knew I wanted to become someone. And then he goes, let me just ask you a question. He goes, do you feel you have what it takes to be one of the best? And I said, I do. He goes, all right, well, sit down. I'll talk to you. And that's how that journey started. So he really struck a nerve with me with that question.
Yeah. Why did you always know that you wanted to serve? And where does that come from?
I think, my father, he was very patriotic, and we were always exposed to kind of like the benefits of being American. And he talked about it a lot. And he was just a very proud American. And although he didn't serve, he had a high regard for the military. And so I was very fascinated and started to really do a lot of research into the military, the different units and the branches of service, and just realized that I love it here so much, even at a young age, that I would like to dedicate some time to give back. I knew I didn't want to make it a career. I wasn't going to stay in 20 or 30 years, but I did want to do that before I did anything else. So I committed 4 years, and I did 4 years in the Marine Corps, became an air traffic controller, and I was stationed in Yuma, Arizona, which we talked about the heat a little earlier, and then finished up my tour right after the Gulf War in El Toro, which that base does not exist anymore, but the Marine Corps Air Station El Toro. And then after that, went to film school. So I wanted to put in my time. I wanted to serve before I did anything else.
And how much of that? I mean, obviously there's so much structure
Yeah.
involved in that, and look, it's life lessons, right? It's
Mhm.
real life. How much of that got you to where you are today? Is if you would have just went to college or right to film school out of high school?
I credit my time in the military with any success that I've had. It did teach me discipline. It taught me how to be systematized. It taught me how to look at things differently. I have a different appreciation. Even I think you give up a lot of the freedoms you have when you go in there, so you appreciate them when you get out. Not that I have the hair to show it, but I did let my hair grow out when I got out. I had a beard. It was pretty awesome, the things you couldn't do in there. But it's impacted me significantly since 1991 when I got out. So much so, I mention it in all of my books. And I'm writing an 8th book right now called Unleash Your Business Warrior. And the subtitle is Military Tactics for Business Success. So I've been able to transition military tactics from all branches into businesses for the past 10 years. And it's not, a lot of times people get a little stressed out when they hear military in our business. And I say, well, we're not doing pull-ups. We're not going for runs. We're not going to the gas chamber. But you can teach them things like leadership traits and principles, being systematized, or as I say, being squared away, how to do recognition in a very impactful way. So there's a lot of secrets that the military uses that businesses can take advantage of. And so that's the whole purpose of this book, is to really teach those nuances that anybody can use. And I figure you're paying your taxes, you're paying for all this to happen anyways. You may as well use it in your business.
Yeah, I think it's good to have that. The one downside is if the leadership is poor, then it spreads throughout the whole. And I go back to like my favorite movie, A Few Good Men,
Yeah.
where these people were just following orders. That's what they were told to do. And
Yeah.
they didn't think it would be so bad, but people follow from the top down. And so
You
when
do.
the top is, it doesn't even have to be corrupt. It could just be not right. It could be not good. It could be,
That's right.
and then everyone else follows.
Well, it's an interesting thought, because you can actually not follow an unethical order in the military.
Right.
And so in that case, the ending of the movie, so there were some things you pick up on having been in the Marines, like, all right, well, that was pretty awesome. They were a little off on this one, but the overall at the end, when the 2 young Marines still, I think they lost their rank or they were discharged, that would have been the right move, because they should have said this is, unethical. And they should have counteracted that, but they didn't.
Is that unethical to haze? I mean, is that really unethical? I know the result obviously wasn't good, but is that I mean, how is that in a code?
Well, I think, like when I was in boot camp, and they used to do, well, if you saw the movie Full Metal Jacket, that was what they did to Private Pyle was called a blanket party.
Right.
And so, no, officially, none of that's legal and none of that's authorized. There are some things that happen, but then again, just like the military, just in people's personal lives or business, there's things that are not authorized that people do.
Right.
And we should be able to question them. So I'm not saying people didn't get blanket parties back in my day, but the Corps didn't condone them. Right. Even if the person might have needed one, I'm not saying they did, but maybe if it squared them away. But yeah, they frown on that. They frown on the hazing. When I was promoted to corporal, I had to walk through the gauntlet. Well, I didn't have to, but I did. And that was where a Marine lined up on each side of you, about 5 or 6 of them deep. And when you got promoted to corporal, they punched you in the arm and kneed you in the leg so you could earn your blood stripe. The Corps doesn't necessarily condone that, and they're not supposed to do that. But there's things that in the hazing process they do. But a code red in that condition, I guess, they should have been able to question it. But I liked the movie too.
Yeah, but people struggle. I struggle the difference between, what I believe in ethically and morally, and there, as a business owner, as a person, there's some things that I think are definitely, black and white, and then certain things that are more of a gray area. How do people handle that if they're not making decisions?
I think it's where you hit the nail on the head. My fourth book is called The Leadership Connection, and it's about leaders connecting with their teams, leaders having that bond with their teams. When there's poor leadership, everything can fall apart. You're going to see a lack of communication. You'll see a lack of integrity. Leaders are expected to set expectations, and it's not just on workflow, but it's actually on performance and how we communicate with each other, how we take care of our people. And so as a business coach, when I go into organizations, I can assess very quickly how strong the leadership team is. And in the civilian world, most people haven't been through leadership development, not at the level that you are in the military. So even if you don't have anybody reporting into you, you're still expected to conduct yourself as a leader. You're expected to exhibit certain traits like bearing and unselfishness or integrity or tact, and certain principles, right? Like looking out for your people or making sure that troop welfare is high. In the civilian sector, that is a serious gap. There's a lot of leadership titles, but a lot of leaders who can't tell you what their role is as a leader. They might be able to tell you their job description, but they don't really understand leadership because it's not something that they focus on daily. In fact, they'll typically focus on it when something goes wrong, which if they focused on it in advance, less things would go wrong. So that's why the military, all 2 million men and women serving right now, they're all continually developed as leaders, regardless of what their job is. They could be infantry, they could be air traffic control, they could be in the mess hall, they could be a truck driver. They're going to be developed as a leader so that it creates a baseline of those expectations. And that part's significantly missing.
Is that what qualifies you to do a course and speak your time in the Marines and as a corporal?
For me to train and develop on leadership was a lot of the traits and principles and the approach come from the Marine Corps. But I also, when I ran a media company, I didn't have the structure of the military there, nor did we want it. It wasn't, the military, the way they operate is good for the military, but we were able to transition in some things from a leadership perspective where we got our whole team looking at themselves as leaders. And we started to see their performance increase. Our results were getting better. Mistakes were going down. There was just more teamwork. And at certain points, we achieved high levels of camaraderie. So, we started to intentionally develop people as leaders. And I kind of went back to day one in the Marine Corps in boot camp. Before you're even a Marine, they teach you how to be a leader, which is an interesting dynamic because they're also calling you the worst names in the world and then developing you as a leader. So,
yeah, you're also, it's interesting being a leader. Like not everyone is cut out to be a leader, nor should everyone be a leader, because if all we have is a bunch of leaders in the room, that's chaos, right?
Yeah, you have to have. That's why they have a chain of command. Somebody has to be in charge. Yeah. And a lot of organizations, you see, they opt for what they call a flat organization, which means there's no depth to their leadership. So there actually has created more confusion than autonomy. You have to understand who's in charge. That's one thing the military is good at. Everybody knows who's in charge. If that person gets taken out, you know who's in charge. That person gets taken out, you know who's in charge. I can't tell you how many business I've been. I said, well, who's in charge of this? Well, okay, that's nobody, right? You should be able to say that faster. So I believe that there's always somebody in charge, and you have a chain of command or an org chart that says, here's our line of communication, here's our line of authority. But if everybody thinks and acts like a leader, you start to see that performance elevates. It's when people stop thinking of themselves. And you're right. I think everyone can learn how to be a leader, but not everybody's ready to be a leader. And I agree that in the civilian world, there are so many people in leadership positions that shouldn't be there right now. That might even extend into government. That might extend into communities. That might extend into charity. There's a lot of people leading that shouldn't be right now.
Yeah, we get. I had that in my previous companies. What they want to give you promote from within is what I'm.
Yes.
They want to promote within, And from a management point of view, you have someone who has no management experience,
Yeah.
which isn't necessarily it's not a deal breaker. It's not the worst thing in the world, but if that's all you're doing and they're not cut out for it, that's going to be, you get yourself into a big mess.
Yeah. And there's a lot of organizations that promote based on this person's been here a long time, so we should probably promote them. But they've never assessed their leadership skills. We'll make him a leader based on he's been here the longest. Okay. Well, and that's a lot of people are in positions of leadership. They just don't understand the purpose. And once you understand the purpose of leadership, then it becomes more natural to do it. And people aren't at such a disadvantage where, like you said, they don't have these skills yet. And then we put them in charge of people. Well, of course, things are going to go wrong. It's like, here, you were the best widget maker, and now you're in charge of all widget makers. But we're not going to teach you how to lead widget makers. Okay, thanks.
What's the biggest misconception about leadership? Not, it's just like, hey, you're going to tell people what to do.
I think the biggest misconception, well, there's a lot of them. For starters, that leading and managing are two separate things, right? And so I will hear people sometimes say, I just have trouble managing my people. And I said, well, why are you managing them when you should be leading them? And they said, well, what's the difference? And I said, well, you should manage stuff. You should manage the work. You should manage budgets and shift schedules and inventory and projects, manage your goals, but you should lead people. You should encourage them, inspire them. You should help them to set and accomplish goals, be their mentor. I was a manager in many respects, in many positions, but I was wrapped in leadership. So I understood to manage work and lead people. And a lot of leaders confuse those. They try managing people. And that's why you get people that are so disgruntled with micromanagement or even macro management or even proper management when strong leadership is available. So these are two completely different entities. In fact, when you're in the military, you go through leadership development programs, not job management training. They separate you from training and they put you in development so they can develop you as a leader. Of course, it doesn't need to be that stringent in the civilian sector, but they just need to understand that there's a difference. We lead people, we manage stuff.
Yeah, I like to consider myself more of a leader, and when people said, why don't you go into management back in the day, I was like, well, I don't want to tell people what to do any more than I want people telling me what to do.
That's right.
Eventually I'm going to have people under me here with my company. But at least you get to build the structure of it and really be responsible for what that looks like, as opposed to you're already gone into the structure and you bring me in to be a leader, to be a manager, but I don't really have a whole lot of say as to what's going on there. It's all under whatever you've already constructed.
That's right. Yeah. I think there's not in the business sector, most leaders don't even know the authority they have. They have a title and it hasn't been very defined. Now they're what they need to manage, the job description, that's pretty defined, but what their authority is, what they can actually do as a leader, sometimes isn't defined. So you have a lot of people with leadership titles that just don't know how to use them. They're just at a loss. And even the person that promoted them really doesn't know how to define leadership. And you'll find in most businesses, there's not a definition that says, here's what it means to be a leader in our organization. And that's something that every branch of the military has. In every branch, it says a leader is a person who, and then they describe what it means. In most organizations, they don't have leadership traits. They don't have leadership definitions. They don't have leadership expectations, but they put you as a leader. So it's like being in a maze in the dark. It's like, hey, congratulations, you're a leader. Hopefully you figured out, nobody else has. And it's not that these organizations haven't had success. They just haven't had the success like they could if they were leading their way there instead of managing their way.
And a lot of this has to do with trust, right? It isn't about trusting. You're trusting whoever you give this responsibility to. And that causes the leadership structure, the management structure, or the family tree for the org. Right. But it's not. I find there's so many coming. I'll tell you a story about this company I worked for, and I had this position. It was weird. I didn't really belong places, but they stuck me under someone, which they shouldn't have. They actually probably could have just made me this separate side, which it probably should have been. And so when I was leaving, we won't get into why I was leaving, but I was leaving and they weren't happy with me. And I wasn't happy with my manager, but yet she came down to me and she said, you're going to need to like train me on what you do and show me. I'm like, well, how is it that you're managing me if you don't know what I'm doing and I need to train you? That seems ridiculous, but that happens often.
Oh, it does. And there's so many people that say exactly what you did. They put me in a position they probably shouldn't have, or my manager doesn't know what I'm doing or how to do what I do. A lot of it doesn't make sense. And even the leader doesn't have to be the expert in everything.
No.
But you have to have some sort of situational awareness. I mean, so when you hear things like this, and this is exactly how a lot of organizations are made up. It's small mom and pop shops to Fortune 500s. There's a lot of people that just don't understand their leadership role, and they're missing out, because if people are our greatest asset, we lead people. So if we're not developing leaders, there's no way we're taking care of our greatest asset. And that's why turnover is so high right now. That's why disengagement is so high. It's all leadership, or lack of it. Yeah. But that's why the majority of what I train on, even though I've got a number of books, is leadership. It's really the starting point.
And maybe people are afraid that they'll create a leader that's better than them and take over what they're doing.
That's a huge point. And so at the media company, when I was starting to climb up through the ranks, if you will, I noticed that some of the people in management roles were holding on to certain duties. They didn't want to teach anybody. And so the culture inadvertently was a lack of job security, or what you said earlier, which is brilliant, is trust. They felt, if I teach this guy who's making less money than me to do this, they're going to get rid of me, which wasn't the case, but it was the perception, which became reality. And exactly what you're saying, I started a culture shift there where you couldn't get promoted until you trained two people to be better than you. And that's how you earned the promotion. So it caused a lot more cross training. It caused a lot more development. And when we promoted somebody up, there were two people capable of doing it better. So, but we had to shift that culture, and it didn't happen overnight. But you're right about that. Some people hold on to it for security purposes. They're afraid to train somebody to be better. But here's the crazy part. When I ask leaders, I'll say, when you hire people, do you hire people better than you or worse than you? And they always say, oh, well, we hire better. And I said, then let them do it, because they can probably do it better than you. That's why we delegate, So it's a very odd dynamic that so many leaders have so much on their plate because they're not delegating to the team they hired to accomplish things through, who they hired to be better than them. So we go in and we realign leadership, and we help them to understand their purpose. And once they understand their purpose, then they're not afraid to do exactly what you said, which is to teach people to do it better than them. And you cause that trust. My whole team is better than me.
Yeah, but
I have a team, and they're better. It'd be weird to say they're worse.
Yeah, or at least that you didn't have the full confidence in them to do whatever they.
That's
need.
right.
I don't know if we need to call them better or worse, but at least have the full confidence that they are to do.
Well, and before I had a team, I had everything. When I was just a one-man show, when I first started, everything that needed to be done was on my plate. So when I hired somebody to take over my calendar, or hired somebody to do graphics, or hired somebody to do accounting, they do it better than me. That was stuff that, I wasn't really cut out for. I could do it. I didn't say I do it well, but I did it. And then it allowed me to focus on the main things that I needed to work on: speaking, coaching, training.
How does what you're doing as a business coaching differ from like the prophet Marcus Lemonis, where he comes in, and there's probably a lot of similarities where like he's sort of coaching them, but he's more targeted in the numbers of it, but coming in saying, hey, here's kind of what you should be doing. You're doing this wrong a lot. And I don't watch it that often. My wife loves it, but it's probably a lot of pushback and defensiveness on someone who's, a business probably more small than bigger, that comes in and is very defensive about it. How much resistance and defensiveness do you see when you come in and because you have to come in and be honest with someone. If you see this as bad, you got to let them know.
Yeah. Well, for me is we do a lot of discovery calls initially. So we try and find out where they really need the coaching. I can come in and coach on leadership, sales, communication, workflow, strategic planning. And so we narrow it down to what their immediate fields are. I always start off with a very basic question. This leads into some great answers that opens the door up for me. And so each book that I have has programs in it. And so they can implement these programs. So you can use the book as a recommended reading. Let's just say sales. So you can have all your salespeople read the sales book, or leaders read the leadership book. And then we have programs. So we can go in and do a series. We can do deep dives and help them create systems. But every time I meet with somebody, I ask them the same question. I said, can your business be greater than it is right now? They always say yes. And then I ask them how. Because everybody says yes, but then you got to get them thinking. Once they say how, then I can go in and help them with that. So I never go in with a predetermined diagnosis. I never say, yeah, they're going to need leadership and sales and planning, even though those are my big three. I really like to find out if they're open-minded. Now, it'd be weird. Now, if I asked you and I said, can your business be greater? And you said, no, we're as good as we'll ever get. Well, you're probably not going to be open for coaching then. And that's fine. Then if you're satisfied, it wouldn't be right to take your money or to invest that kind of time. But 100% of them always say, my business can be greater. My team can be greater. Our performance or results can be greater. And then when I say how, then they start going down the laundry list and start going, well, in these areas here. And some businesses are much more efficient or effective than others, but they always have an area they want to get better. And that's what we specialize in. So we can really target those areas and then put a plan together to help them in that specific
Do most people know where their organization is lacking or what's not working well?
I think that when you get up into the C-suite, they have a pretty good idea of it, because they may say, if revenue isn't as high as they want, they may say, well, we need to increase sales or our outreach or marketing. If their profits aren't there, we may need to look operationally. Are they delivering operational excellence? Most of them are aware, at least on an overarching side of things, that here's where we need to get better. Morale could be better. And so, well, there's a leadership issue. We need to talk about leadership. We need to talk about your culture. We need to talk about your identity. I would say that the majority of leaders do have their finger on the pulse. And we work with businesses, small and large. We work with organizations, charity organizations, military, first responders. So a lot of different organizations. And they're pretty good at telling you. But we also have assessments where the team can share areas to get better too. So when they're really open for it, it's not just coming from the leaders, but we can find out from the team members where there's some improvements needed. And then those might have been some of the ones that the leaders aren't seeing from their vantage point. And that's helpful too, if they're open for that.
How long is the process of coaching? Obviously everything's different, but ideally you get in, you get out.
Yeah, typically I schedule things on a 90-day basis. I feel that people can stay laser focused for about 90 days. And that's not to say that we haven't done a year or 2 years with a company, but when you can cover topics like leadership, sales, and planning, they're pretty large overlapping topics. So you could be in there helping them refine or enhance their systems. But typically we look at scheduling out 90 days of coaching, even if it's one-on-one coaching or team coaching, because they can stay in the hunt for that long. Then you got to decompress a little bit and then go after the next 90 days. But I have had clients book me out for a year or 2 years in advance of coaching. Just, they may be a larger company. There may be more divisions. They may lack a strategic plan, which sounds odd, but some companies don't have a plan. Saying it out loud is weird, but they just don't. So that process might take a little bit longer. Or when you look at sales, they may not exactly have a sales system. They just kind of do sales. So when I said, do you want to increase your sales results? Yes. Can you tell me about your sales system? Well, what we do is, and anytime you start with you probably don't have a well-oiled system. And so we can help them in those areas. It's not that they're not successful, but it's the difference of being in the minor leagues versus being in the major leagues, right? You're still playing the same game. You're just playing at a different level once you have leading, planning, and selling more locked in, and where it's fun for everybody. A lot of people just don't think leading, planning, selling is fun. So we have to make it fun, get people's enthusiasm levels higher, get them engaged, get them all on board, just like in Top Gun, get on the plane so you can elevate.
Get them all excited. Talk about the speaking that you do. How did that come about, and what are the types of engagements that you have?
So here's the funny part. When I'm introverted by nature, although you might not realize it because I do podcasts, have my own podcast, and go speak and do coaching. But I was more introverted because I was an air traffic controller in the Marines. So I was up in a tower and I only talked to people through a headset. Did talk to Top Gun. That was pretty awesome.
Mm.
Didn't even know they were real in 1988. It was like, oh, wow. Okay. Then I worked in the media world. So a lot of times I worked in dark rooms doing DVDs and other things before I became the VP. When I was coming out of the whole cancer side with my wife after her first battle, we went to an event called Relay for Life through the American Cancer Society. And they had asked me after we registered to go there and walk the track all night. They said, would you share your story about being a caregiver? And I said, I could. How long do you need? They said, just like 5 minutes. And I'm like, okay, I could do that. And I was very, very introverted, even suffering glossophobia, fear of public speaking. And I put together a speech and I got up there and I read it actually. And I had a hard time getting through it. I got kind of emotional, but brought back all the emotions of being a caregiver. And then afterwards, so I was like, all right, it was not a great experience for me doing the first one because I barely made it through. I got all choked up. But then people came up and they said, thanks for sharing that. That was a huge help. And I was like, okay. I thought I butchered it, And
Well, it probably was very real, and
yeah,
those are the types that I think people resonate with more than just someone up, spitting out whatever they wrote to be motivational.
I think there's a lot of speakers that like to speak, and I didn't like to speak, and I think that's what helped me out as far as relating to the audience. And the unique thing is that the people in the audience, they worked in businesses, and so it came pat to pat. I did a few of those type of speeches, and then people started asking me, would you come into our business to speak? And I said, sure. What would you like me to speak about? And they said, well, you talk a lot about goal setting. Could we talk about goals? I said, sure. And then people started flying me to different parts of the country to do it. And I'm like, all right, this might work out. So I started to write the books and speak on those topics. And the book writing really helped me, I feel, to become a better speaker. I was able to quantify my thoughts in the books. And you've written a book too, or?
No, I haven't written a book.
I thought I
started to write a book, and then it was. I think eventually I read. I have some ideas on books, but it would be more of just like I don't know.
It's an incredible experience. Even this one I'm working on right now, all that stuff is in your head anyways, and as you start putting it down, I found the most interesting part about the book writing is that I would write a paragraph and show it to my wife or show it to somebody on the team. And like, well, what are you trying to say here? I'm not getting this. And they're like, what? It's so clear. And I'm like, all right, maybe it's not. And it really has helped me to articulate what I'm trying to say more because it's up here and it makes sense, but does it make sense on the page? And does it make sense when I share it? Because I've seen some speakers and there's a lot of great speakers out there. But at the end of it, you're like, what did I just listen to?
Yeah, I just had an email from someone who was I wanted them to review like a case study I'm doing, and his question was like, well, what are you trying to say here? And if I have to explain it to you, then it's obviously not done well enough. So now we got to go back and be like, all right, it's like it's the phrase like explain to me like I'm a 10-year-old or if
it's interesting, Matt, because when I wrote the first book, it covered a lot of the story about cancer. And Gina would often say, well, wait a minute, when did this happen? So I realized that some of the things that were in there, we had pictures to say we were out at this point and she didn't remember everything. So writing the book became very therapeutic from that standpoint. But it also helped me just to articulate the message. And I think from a business standpoint, people could really benefit by just jotting their thoughts down before sharing messages with their team. Case in point, I got called out when I first started speaking. I got called out because one of the techniques I used with my wife when she was sick was we would set goals. And so we had the goal of buying a house because she got diagnosed about 10 months after we got engaged or after we got married, excuse me. So we're 10 months, we're still in the honeymoon phase and she got diagnosed the first time. And I finally figured out that when I talked about goals, it allowed her to think a little bit more about the future and not so much about the present. So we would talk about goals a lot. Well, I did a speech one time very early on, about 10 years ago, and somebody came up to me afterwards and they said, goal setting doesn't cure cancer, which I never said it did. And then they went on to say, my husband or whoever it was, her brother, we talked about goals and he didn't make it. And I thought, wow, like I really need to deliver a better message here. And so when that stuck with me, that That one stung because I didn't intend it, but the message that was heard was goals cure cancer.
That's a weird. It's a weird message to hear.
Yeah.
For them, I'm saying like I would think it's a low, very very low percentage of people who would get that message from what you said, but it does. But I understand.
But boy, I'll tell you what, when I talk about goal setting during that time period, I always pre-frame it with, I know goals don't cure cancer, but they allow you to look into the future and have hope, because that one critique stuck with me. And so, but it helped me to deliver a better message where now when I share that part of the story, and I'll share it during some of the leadership or sales or strategic planning, it'll eventually come to that. I've had people come up afterward and cry at an event and just start telling me their story about somebody that they took care of during cancer, or somebody that maybe they had cancer. So it's been unique to intertwine so much of the personal experiences through the Marine Corps, or being a caregiver, or running a business. And I think it just gives more credibility to what the message is and the programs, and people want to speak this think great language. And I think that's what we've done a pretty good job of, is creating a language in leading, planning, and selling that people want to speak, and it gets them excited. So like for strategic planning, everything's about aviation. So, and it helped that Top Gun is over $1 billion right now. So I can reference that, even though I was in the Marines and they were in the Navy, they have their movies pump you up more than the Marine movies do. But, I think just having that language people want to speak is huge.
So what is Think Great then? You mentioned it at the top of the show about helping the families of people who have served. But what is Think Great?
So Think Great is the concept of teaching people to think differently during tough times. And so the whole concept between the business side, Think Great, is that every business faces challenges. It's really how they navigate through it, navigate themselves and their teams through it. And so what we've done is we've taken these 3 pillars, leading, planning, and selling, and we've taught them how to strengthen those pillars so that no matter what comes their way, their business stays strong and their ability to support new levels of greatness remains intact. There's a lot of businesses that have, like you said earlier, poor leadership, maybe no plan or a dismal plan, and a lackluster sales system. And yet they have these big goals for the future. So with those 3 pillars being weak, they can't possibly support what their goals are. So what we do is we go in and just strengthen those pillars. We help to fill in the blanks, if you will. The Think Great Foundation was launched because I've always had a passion for helping veteran families out. And there's a lot of organizations that help veterans. And it typically goes to the service member, whether they're still serving active duty or in a veteran status. And I've done a lot of family readiness programs where I do goal setting techniques for spouses in the military all over the country. And I was speaking to some commanders and I said, I want to help military spouses out. I just don't know the exact area. And one of them was a colonel in the Marine Corps. And he said, get them back, focus on their education, get them scholarships if you can. He goes, they sacrifice so much. And I'm like, why didn't I think that's a great idea? And so in 2019, we launched the Think Great Foundation and awarded out over 25,000 in scholarships. And we were going to do a big one in 2020, but you know what happened in 2020 and 2021. So this year we are back in the hunt, and we'll be awarding 50,000 in scholarships out this year. So we're pretty excited about it. And it's for spouses in any branch all over the world. And we'll host a big event here in Minnesota where we'll have some of them walk across stage, and we put on a big night of entertainment for them and just recognize them as our home front heroes. So it's awesome.
It sounds like Ticket Time Machine can help with that event whenever you guys get around to.
I think there's some great synergy because, Matt, we want to take this nationally. We want to have events in all 50 states to help raise money and help fund scholarships. So yes, we do have a lot to talk about.
Have you done a TED Talk?
I did a TED Talk in Brookings, South Dakota. It was called "Millennials Are Not Your Leadership Challenge," and millennials love it. We have a huge millennial following because of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I've done 200 plus episodes of this. I love going on other podcasts to talk, and not even just about Ticket Time Machine, but about anything. But I wouldn't want to stand up in front of a crowd, even if it was, 40, 50 people. I'd rather sit here and know that millions were watching.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. It's just more, I don't know, it's more conversation than it seems like
It's
pressure.
it's interesting because it's very regimented, right? You have like your 12 to 15 minutes. It's just one speaker after the next. They probably record 12 to 15 of them at the same location. So you get to hear a lot of cool TED Talks. I was there and I heard all kinds of amazing speakers. But yeah, then they have usually a theater type environment packed with people, and you just go out, you do your thing, and that's that. You don't take questions from the audience. So it's very different than my normal speaking engagements where I like to make it very interactive. But I got recommended to them by another TED Talk speaker. And when they called me and asked what my topic would be, I said, well, I want to do millennials are not your leadership challenge. They said, okay, we want you in there, which they were all millennials on the committee. So like, we want this topic. And it really went over well. It was a great experience. And I would love to do another TED Talk at some point, but very different than doing anything else. But I think you'd be great at it. I mean, you're very articulate. You're very confident when you speak.
It's very hard for me to memorize 12 minutes of material. I'm terrible at that. It's why I was not a good test taker. I'm more of a conversation. I'd get up and talk, on a panel. That would be, for me, more of a panel than a speaker. It's interesting. And then it's also like, look, I think everyone has probably a good story to share. And it's like, think about, like, I've been hit, not me personally, my whole family has been hit by cancer in terrible ways, and friends and family. But, not everyone's able to express and share in a way that's going to impact people. There could be millions of books out there of people and their experiences with cancer. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to just be like, all right, I'm going to read read like there's thousands of them. So it's a lot when you put a book out there that you're fighting against a lot just to get your story heard.
There's a lot of other resources that they could go to. I told my wife when we started our company, I said, I'm going to write about things from my own experience. So I'm not going to borrow other stories. It's not that I don't mention Mother Teresa in a book or mention Abraham Lincoln or whoever. You can mention things, but my whole book isn't about their stories. They have their own stories. I just share what I've been through and some of the techniques and tactics and strategies. And I said, here's what I did through this. And luckily we've had a really great following and people who have incorporated these tactics into their business or even in their personal life, because a lot of it translates over. We've written some personal books too, where we have a book just on goal setting, the goal formula. When I was Gina's caregiver, I put on a lot of weight. I just stopped taking care of myself, and I ended up not fitting in any clothes. I had to go keep buying bigger sizes. And I created a weight loss program and lost 42 pounds in under 90 days. And, when it's that significant and people can see that goal, then they say, how did you do it? And so my unofficial motto is, if somebody asks me 10 times how I did something successfully, because I've screwed plenty of things up, but if they ask me 10 times, then I'll write a book about it. Okay. And then that's how I launched the Scale Factor. So I have a book that competes in the health and wellness side of things. And there's so many of them out there, but I just kept it down to here's what I did. And it's been very popular, and it's great because we get people sending us photos or sending us an email saying, here's how much weight I've lost. Here's how I'm getting my fitness back in shape. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah. The airlines have a really great message. Back to what you said is, put on your own mask before you go to help.
That's correct.
Someone else, right? Because it's so common sense, but it's like, if you can't help yourself, how can you help other people?
It's true. And so many caregivers have that same story. In fact, I'll know caregivers in the audience because I'll ask a question when I'm doing a presentation. I said, when you're a caregiver, who do you stop taking care of? And they all say yourself. And then you're like, all right, there's caregivers out there. So it's a very interesting dynamic because you go into panic mode, and most of us have never been trained to be a caregiver. All of a sudden, overnight or within a split second, you're a caregiver. And so I've been Gina's caregiver through 4 battles, 4 different cancers, and then 6 years ago was the cardiac arrest. But she's been in the hospital multiple times, being in AFib mode or things like that. Sometimes when you're a caregiver, you'll always be that caregiver. And I'm going to write a book. I do have one. It's not the next one, but maybe a few after that. I do want to write a book about being a caregiver because it's a very interesting phenomenon when you're in that bubble of being a caregiver, what your world becomes. And I think it'll resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah. Is there one book that you are more proud of or that's done much better than others?
For us, the bread and butter, if you will, is the leadership connection. Because most companies, when they ask, where do we start? I recommend leadership. I recommend unifying their leadership team. And so we've been very fortunate to have the book in many companies in many different industries, even US Bank. They have divisions that are using the leadership connection and have gone through our program. So that one I always recommend. That would be the best start. Just learn how to be a leader at your level. Learn how to relate to people. Get back into the people side of business, not necessarily the number side. And so that one, we've even had leaders say, I read this and I used some of these techniques on my teenager. So, so hey, parents, you can get your kids squared away too, but it's a great step-by-step process on how to create a leadership environment in an organization. And it gives exercises and tools on leading our greatest asset, our people.
Yeah. You went to film school. What was the thinking there? What were you going to be? Because I actually, when I was in college, what I thought I wanted to do was work with movie trailers, promotional.
Oh, sure.
That's what I wanted to do. I couldn't get a job anywhere doing it, so I kind of gave up that dream. But I love movies.
Oh,
what were you wanting to do, and how big are movies in your life today?
They're huge. My dad took me to movies all the time. And, I remember back in the early to late 80s, all the way that, just going and seeing everything. We would go to the movies sometimes twice in a weekend. And of course you're watching all the 80s action movies and, who didn't like Stallone and Schwarzenegger and all those guys back then. But I became a huge movie fan. Then when I went in the Marine Corps, there was a point when I was in there that I realized that was the career I wanted. And so I started to jot some script ideas down, but I didn't know where to start. And so when I moved back to El Toro, I went up to the American Film Institute and met with a guy, and he says, how are your grades out of high school? And I said, well, not that great. And he was telling me what the big 5 film schools were, like USC, UCLA, NYU, AFI, all these schools. And I said, I don't think I can get in there right now. And he said, you should go to a community college. And he goes, the number one community college for filmmaking at that time was Orange Coast College in Costa Mesa, California. And so I went there and I started taking film classes. And I didn't have the best grades in high school, but I actually got my 2-year degree in a year and 8 months. And I became valedictorian. That was not me. That was the Marine Corps. I came out disciplined. In fact, one of my professors, Bill Hall, he ran the entire program there. He even told me I had to take down my intensity a notch because I was scaring some of the students. I still had a high and tight haircut for a while. I'm like, all right, Bill, I got it. I can do that, Bill. I can do it. But I was just so fired up to be in film school. And my dream was to go to USC. At that point, probably still the number one film school. And I applied to USC. I got in there, got into the school. And then the following semester got into their film program. And in my class, I went to film school with Rick Famuyiwa. He just directed a bunch of episodes of The Mandalorian. Chris Bell, he directed Bigger, Stronger, Faster, and a bunch of other documentaries that are just amazing. And my cinematography partner was Kevin Feige, who is now the president of Marvel Studios. So there you go. And it was an amazing class. And I started working in the industry right after USC. And then when I got married, my wife got diagnosed and I left the industry completely for a long time. And that's when I went into financial services sales. So it was kind of an interesting cycle. And then I got back in entry level and then became the vice president of that company. Using all the techniques I train on now, I help them to lead, plan, and sell at different levels. So I worked my way up in 18 months from entry level to VP. But to answer your question, how much of a movie, how important are they? I've already seen Top Gun in the theater twice. I love movies. I do. They fire me up.
Yeah, I love movies too. Saw Deep Water with Ben Affleck over the weekend, was pretty good. And then was a movie with Miles Teller and Chris Hemsworth. It was a weird, like he was trying to treat the brain on those. Two pretty.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I saw that advertised. That was it looked pretty psychological.
Yeah, it was. What the heck? I gotta look.
I know which one you're talking about. It's a crazy trailer.
Spiderhead. It's called Spiderhead.
Yeah.
Definitely recommend it. The movie. It's interesting. The movie. There's a lot of good military movies, and then even offshoots of military.
Yeah.
The one that comes to my mind. It's not necessarily a military movie, but it's the Falling Down movie with Michael Douglas, because I think he was in the military, but he wasn't treated well after he got out, and kind of
lost his stuff.
Yeah, lost his way.
Yes,
and then went nuts about it.
Yes, he went nuts. He took the Olympic gold for going nuts in that.
Yeah, it was a great movie. There was another one with I think it was Jake Gyllenhaal on Netflix. He wasn't of someone who just goes bad.
I know he was in Jarhead.
It was the road rage movie on Netflix. It was.
Are you talking about the one with Russell Crowe?
Russell Crowe. Yeah, I don't know. Unhinged. I don't know why I thought it was. That was a pretty wild.
Russell Crowe killed it. Literally killed it. Yeah. That movie. You just don't even want to touch your horn after you see that movie.
Yeah, well, I say that to my people I know that they get upset on the road. I'm like, just relax,
Yeah.
So we all do stuff. We cut people off, whatever it is. But nowadays, I just have no idea what their mental state is, or if they're carrying a gun in their car. Whatever it may be, I just, unless you really, push me off the road, or who knows what.
Yeah, it's probably not worth putting your life at risk just to give somebody the finger.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. What are some of the do you have your favorite movies? Like, some of your top 5?
Yeah. All right. So people always kind of trip out on my top 5, but I think it was at the time I saw it. I loved Conan the Barbarian. The original with Arnold was just, I saw it when I was 13 in the theater, and I'm like, this is awesome. I love Full Metal Jacket from the standpoint of, it depicted Marine Corps boot camp pretty closely to what the experience was. I think my favorite military movie is Apocalypse Now. I don't know, just the whole journey that they're on. I love that. Let's see which other ones. I love so many of them. I love the original Jaws. Jaws is a classic, and I'm a huge horror film fan. So this is the 40th anniversary of the movie The Thing, John Carpenter's remake of The Thing. And I'm actually going with my son, his girlfriend, my daughter, her boyfriend, and her friend to see it here. There's a theater toward Minneapolis that's playing it for the 40-year anniversary. So that one is one of my favorites. So I tend to like movies where there's a very limited cast and they tend to be isolated and they have all these issues they got to work out.
That's the way.
Yeah.
Jaws is one of my friend Brent's, who's usually in the comments, one of his favorites. I like G.I. Jane. I really like that as a military movie.
Yeah, Demi Moore was great in that.
That was great. Obviously, I think that came back with the Will Smith thing. And then The General's Daughter, I thought was a really well done. That's
hold on. Is that with John Travolta?
That is with that's a good question. I don't think that.
Yeah, I've seen that one. I know what your
daughter got raped.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it was. Oh yeah, it was General. Yeah, it was Travolta. And James Woods and Timothy Hutton. Good cast.
Yes. Yeah, they had a great cast in that. That was a good one.
Yeah. They just talked about Clerks 3. They're coming out with another Clerks. I'm a big fan of his movies. Kevin Smith.
I do like that. I am a superhero movie fan too. So I like the superhero movies. Not all of them are good. What's that?
There are not too many of them. They just keep coming out with them.
Yeah, that's why it's harder to find the really, really good ones, I think, because they're spitting them out like crazy.
My friend and I just watched the Batman movie, and I used to love that type of Batman where it's like it was 3 hours that was long, and it's dark the way they wanted it to be. It's good. It's worth. I could watch movie. I watch movies. My wife likes to watch shows, but I like to watch movies. because it's just so, I don't know, to be able to wrap something up in 2 hours is very
It's
impressive.
crazy.
You have,
Yeah.
13
It's
seasons, 13 episodes in a series to sort of wrap up a story. These people are doing in
yeah.
one shot.
I think it's that whole storytelling side, and for me, um, as a speaker, you're telling a story up there, and yes, you're going to give some gold nuggets, and there should always be takeaways. But you're sharing your story, and that ability to take this story and condense it down. I think a lot of that does come from my filmmaking background, the ability to tell a story. When we were making student films, you had sometimes 5 minutes to tell your story. They didn't give you a lot. It's like a TED talk.
Yeah.
So you had to really focus on some of the smallest little nuances to guide people along that journey. And I think that's part of why I love the filmmaking process so much. And yes, I have my favorite non-traditional movies that maybe aren't popular, but I think, I do like all genres. I enjoy that process. I'm still fascinated sitting in a movie theater and it goes dark and there's a movie playing. Like that experience to me, especially when it's packed. When we went and saw Top Gun, it was sold out, and to have that shared experience with people is amazing.
I used to go to a new movie every Friday. I would just go
Yeah.
to the theater on Friday afternoon and don't tell anyone, but I would also sometimes just walk into a second one. One time I walked into a third one. It was one day. It was a long day at the movies.
All right. So in all transparency, I did that with 3 friends. We did a triple header.
Yeah.
We paid for a single, but we did see 3 that day.
Yeah.
And Buckaroo Banzai was one of them. So this is going to tell you how long ago it was.
I think you should be. It's just like if I pay for a movie, just go. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a big deal if I sit and stay. I paid to get through the door.
I did buy.
They don't have someone at every. They don't have someone at every. They don't have someone at every entrance. They have it at the main entrance. So it's like that's what that should mean.
Right.
I paid. I go in.
Oh yeah.
And go watch whatever. I mean, how many people are sitting there watching 2-3 movies anyway? Probably not enough.
Not many. And if you can buy some popcorn for each movie,
yeah, of course,
it's all fair.
Yeah, you buy a thing of popcorn.
Yeah,
do that.
Yeah,
What
exactly.
You went to USC? Is it ridiculous that they're going to be in the Big Ten?
I saw that. I know they were in the Pac-10 and the Pac-12 for so long. I just saw that announcement.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how that works out. I mean, you knew who you were playing every year, so I mean, for them not to play UCLA would be weird.
Yeah, they will. I mean, they'll figure it out, but
they'll squeak that one in.
They'll be in Wisconsin and Iowa in the brutal cold. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I saw the notification, but I didn't see all their logic behind it yet. I haven't seen it, so I don't know. That's a big move.
Do you have a like your dream? Like if you could pick and either speak at any company or you could coach any company, which companies would you choose for those 2 things?
I love what I love the most is I love like kickoff events, like annual kickoff events. So, when you look at the ones like I've done them for US Bank or other larger organizations, even the Marine Corp, I've done events for them. One of my dream speaking engagements would be to do it overseas for our troops. That I would love to do. I'd love to go wherever they're deployed, kind of like a USO type of event, and do an event overseas. Perhaps if we have anybody stationed anywhere in the Middle East, I'd love to go there and do that. I know that sounds weird, but I would just love to do some give back for the troops. There's companies like US Bank that care about their people and invest in them. And when you're doing an event where they're not just looking for a speaker, but you're part of an event to impact people, there's nothing greater. And I've spoken at events where they're just, you can tell the event planner is just looking for a speaker. They just got to find a speaker. But when they're really looking for you to customize your material and take it in, and you're doing it on that larger scale, there's nothing greater than that.
Yeah, my sister does that. She brings speakers in for the events at her company. They got like Magic Johnson and the most known of the known.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's
awesome. And not all event planners are created equal, and not all speakers are created equal. So when you have that right match of a speaker who wants to deliver an impactful message and an event planner who wants to get a speaker in there to deliver an impactful message, I think there's just a magic that happens.
Yeah, she's great at what she does.
It's awesome.
We're going to let you out of the Wolff Den with the same question everyone gets. You can spend a day with anyone in the world. They have to be alive, and you can't be related to them. Who are you going to choose, and what would you do?
I would choose Arnold Schwarzenegger. I grew up watching his films. He was my favorite all time. I even ditched school my senior year to go see him get his star on the Walk of Fame in Hollywood.
There you go.
I found out where he was filming certain things in the LA area, and I'd go to see him. But I never really had the opportunity to meet him. He did give me a thumbs up back at at his Walk of Fame, but there was a lot of people there. But I would have a workout with him, and then just like to hear his thoughts on success. I think he's got a great mindset. So it'd be awesome.
Great story. I think that's the first time anyone's chosen him, but it's a great choice, and we'll throw him on the list. If we ever get in touch with him, we'll
let the Austrian Oak know that I'd like to have lunch with him and work out.
Oh, big party. Well, great to have you on here. I think a lot of good stuff. And if you want to find out more, go to thinkrate90.com. Get one of the books. You got 7 books with an 8th on the way. Thinkrate90.com. Eric, thanks a lot for your time, and I look forward to hearing more about what you guys are doing in the future.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me on. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks. Have a great day, everyone. We got another episode tomorrow, and we'll see you then. Have a great night.